Welcome back to the channel, and after taking a few weeks off to try and win some money back at Stones in Thunder Valley, we're finally back at the wildest poker room in all of Northern California, which is none other than Capital Casino. But before we jump into the poker hands, a lot of you guys have been asking me for a rice update, so here it is. It's pretty obvious to me that every single one of you think I'm a poker pro because I never make mistakes and my win rate is off the charts this year. But for my full-time career, I'm actually a rice farmer. I'm in business with both my brother and old man, and we own about 500 acres of rice fields overlooking the Sutter Buttes, as you could see on your screen. Even though it looks like this is just a big field of grass, it's actually all rice that's about 2 months away from being harvested. We use the drone to get a bird's eye view of the fields because they're so flat that it's hard to get the full picture of what's going on from ground level. Most of the farmers in the area farm just rice, but if you look in the far right hand corner of your screen, you'll see the bright yellow fields, which are all sunflowers. If you guys have ever wondered what a rice field looks like up close, then I'll take you straight to ground level. Even up close, it looks like a big field of grass, but if you get super close, you can see that the kernels are finally starting to head out. Once the plant matures, we'll drain all the water in the fields and let them dry before sending in these massive combines to harvest our Cal Rose medium grain rice. So now that I got you guys all caught up with my main source of income, let's head out to Capital Casino to hopefully boost our side income to minimum wage. We buy in for our usual $500 starting stack, and action gets started right away when middle position limps and the low jack raises to $15. Hijack puts in the call, and I look down at the worst hand ever created in 7-deuce offsuit. So you're probably asking yourself, why is this jackass showing us this hand? Is he about to do something stupid? Well, the answer to that is, yes I am. As every poker book I've never read says, I should be folding here, but we're trying to set the tone for the day and make a statement. So I raise the price of poker to $75, and one by one, everyone folds.
Got him! Got him!
Obviously got to show the table to get some street cred, and I ask every single person at the table one question.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
If you guys want to play with me and see more of these shenanigans, come join me in my weekly meetup game every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's on the Club GG app, and it's a 50-cent $1 game, and I give away $100 to the highest stack at the end of the night. I also play 4 tables of cash games most nights, so if you want in on the action, click the Club GG link below and use my reference code. Next hand up, early position limps, and I look down at pocket 8s and raise them up to $20. Folds back to the limper, and she puts in the call. With $40 in the middle, the flop comes out Queen 7-4 with 2 spades. Our opponent now leads out for $25. Since there's both straight and flush draws available, I decide to stick in the call to see what she does on the turn. Turn comes out the 3 of hearts, and now she slows down and checks. Could bet here for some protection, but 6-5 got there for the straight, and we could still be behind her Queen X holdings. So I check it back, and the river is one of the worst cards in the deck, and the 9 of spades bringing in the front door flush. She leads out for more than a min bet, so I just snap fold because I don't beat anything now. This is an overnight game and the stacks are huge, so I add on $500 to match some of the action players, and we're now into the game for $1,000 total. For this next hand, under the gun calls the $3 blind, next stack raises to 15, and I'm in the cutoff and pick up the exact opposite of 7-deuce offsuit when we look down at the best hand ever created in pocket aces. I raise the price of poker to $45 and our opponent 6 in the call. With $90 in the pot, the flop comes out Jack 5-4 with 2 spades, and on a board like this, it's important to charge all his flush draws and get value from his Jack X holdings. So I bet $50, and he asks if we have 7-deuce again while tossing his hand in the muck. I tell the entire table that they're gonna have to pay to see from here on out, while obviously just not wanting to show that I had aces. Since I was at Stones in Thunder for the last month, I can't remember the last time I played a bomb pot. So let's see what we could pull off. It costs $15 to join the party, and 8 people come along for the ride, so after the drop there's $115 in the pot. We get dealt a beautiful 9-5 offsuit and go straight to a flop of 9-5-3 with 2 diamonds, giving us top 2 pair. Under the gun leads out for $40, and he's been pretty tight up to this point, so now it's decision time. There's still a ton of people behind me left to act, so I don't think slow playing is the best move with so many draws available. So I raise it up to $130 and everyone folds one by one, including the under the gun player. Not too disappointed about it, because any card other than a 9 or a 5 would have put us in a weird spot. Just glad to take down a solid profit. A tight player in early position opens to $15, and I look down at 9-8 of spades and just put in the call. Cutoff calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of A7 4 rainbow with 1 spade. Original raiser checks, I check, and the cutoff checks it back. Still 3 ways to a very interesting turn in the 7 of spades, giving us a straight flush draw. Original raiser now leads out for $15 into a pot of 45, and to me that just screams sizing tell. I don't think this player has an ace after just checking flop, so instead of calling and hoping we hit one of our outs, I decide to implement the semi-bluff and raise to $55. If we get called, we have plenty of equity to work with, but just like we wanted, they both fold. It's important to look for these weakness tendencies on your opponents and pounce on them with hands that have equity.
Yeah, you can do it.
Middle position opens the action to $16 and big blind puts in the call. I'm in the $6 straddle and look down at Jack 3 of diamonds, and it's time to defend my straddle. I put in the extra $12 and the flop comes out Ace Jack 6 with 2 diamonds, giving us middle pair and a flush draw. Big blind and I check and flow, and the middle position player continues the aggression for $18. Big blind folds, and now it's decision time. A lot of low stakes players like to overplay these types of hands and put in a raise, but the problem with that is you already have showdown value with the pair. So if you raise, you're only getting hands you're beating to fold, and the hands that will continue most likely have you dominated. So given that, I decided to just put in the call to either improve or let our opponent keep bluffing if he's full of it. We go to a turn which comes out the 6 of spades, pairing the board, which I was pretty happy with because we're chopping with all his Jack X holdings since I have an ace kicker now. I check, and our opponent continues the aggression for $28. Easy call for us, so I toss in the chips, and the river is the beautiful deuce of diamonds, giving us the flush. Now we need to do a 180 on our logic. If our opponent was bluffing, he'd probably shut it down since a front door flush came in, and if he had an ace without a diamond, he'd more than likely check it back. So in order to avoid that, I lead out for $38, but he eventually decides to fold.
One time and it was...
Next hand up, I get dealt my favorite hand in poker, which is Jack 10 suited, and raise it to $15 in early position. Next act puts in the call, and so does the big blind, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of 9-3 deuce with 2 hearts, giving us, well, nothing. So after the big blind checks and flow, I could just check since I have Jack high, but this combination of cards is actually the perfect hand to start bluffing with. We have the range advantage, meaning we have all the overpairs on this board, and there really shouldn't be any 2 pairs represented. So given that, I throw out a c-bet bluff of $25 and just our opponent next act calls. So since he just called on this type of draw heavy board, at best he has a 9x holding or a ton of draws. So keeping that in mind, we go to a 7 of clubs turn, which doesn't really do much for our hand besides give us the nuts if an 8 comes. Having played with this opponent for years, I know he's not calling my early position raise with 9-7, so he's still capped to either a draw or 1 pair since he didn't raise me on the flop. So I keep the aggression going and throw out a bet of $65. If he calls, I'm basically jamming any non-heart card other than a 9, 10, or jack. But luckily this hand doesn't come to that because our opponent tosses his hand in the muck, saying that his 9 must be no good. Either the world is coming to an end or it's an election year because I just pulled off 3 bluffs in the same session.
So then he's in the halfway. Yeah, they're halfway.
In this next one, the low jack opens to $15 and the high jack puts in the call. I'm in the cutoff and look down at the ladies, pocket queens. Since I have position, I don't want to raise too big to get them to fold since the goal is to play a big pot. So I raised to $55, and it's good to be back at Capital Casino because both players put in the call. With $165 in the middle, we get an amazing flop of 10-6-6 with 2 hearts giving us the overpair. They check and flow, And since there's a flush draw on the board, I throw out a $70 bet to get value from their 10x holdings and flush draws, but they must have missed completely because they both fold right away. The $6 straddle is on and the cutoff puts in the call. This player's had a few too many to drink today, so when I look down at King 10 offsuit on the button, I'm pretty sure I'm way ahead of the limping range. So I raised to $20 and just this player puts in the call. With $40 in the middle, we get a terrible flop of 6-5-4 rainbow, but our opponent just open tosses her hand in the muck and we win $20 uncontested. But we then go card dead for about 30 minutes before our last hand of the day, since 2 o'clock is quickly approaching, which is when we always leave. Middle position opens to $15, same opponent from last hand calls, and I look down at ace king of spades in the small blind. Never flatting here, so I raised to $70 and everyone at the table folds one by one. Really wanted to call, but no complaints, scooping in $33 uncontested. That was my last hand of day one, so let's get to the outro.
Day one back at Capital couldn't have gone much smoother. In for 1,000 and out for 1,310 for a $310 win. Hopefully we can keep it going into day two.
For day two, we buy in for the usual $500 starting stack and hope to keep the momentum going from yesterday. First real hand comes with a $6 straddle on, and the cutoff just calls the $6. Button min clicks to just $12, and I'm in the small blind and look down at ace-jack offsuit, which I guarantee is ahead of everyone so far. So I raise to $30 for value, but now the straddler goes all in for $240. Folds back to me and the sizing seems super fishy, but a lot of hands he'd do this with have me in pretty terrible shape. So I decide to fold and our opponent turns over pocket aces, which had us completely dominated. Next interesting hand action gets folded to me and it's my turn to get dealt the best hand in poker, which is none other than the bullets, pocket aces. I raise them up to the standard bet of $15 and everyone folds.
Fuck off!
From here on out, whenever I'm at Capital Casino, I'm going to push myself to play deeper, especially against action players with big stacks. So I add on $500 and we're into the game for $1,000 total. I'm in the $6 straddle and under the gun opens the action to $20. Middle position calls, cutoff calls, and I look down at ace king of diamonds. Don't want to take this multi-way out of position, so I raise it up to $130 to either take it down now or just get one caller. But one by one, everyone tosses their hand in the muck. Not too disappointed since we just have ace high, and taking down $60 of dead money uncontested is a win in my book. We're down about $90 on the day and things have gone pretty smooth so far. Action gets folded to the cutoff, who opens to $15. He's been opening super wide in position and hates facing aggression, so after the button calls, I look down at 10-7 of spades in the small blind, and I decide to play the aggressive route and 3-bet to $65. We get just what we want because the cutoff snap folds, so our read of him not having much was spot on. But what I didn't expect was the button to double flat call the $65 raise. So the problem now is she only has about $77 left in her stack, which is just about a half pot bet. Double flat calls are usually pocket pairs or high Broadway cards and not much else. So we're going to a flop and the dealer puts out an ace jack 10 2 heart 1 spade board, giving us bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw. Now we're in the thick of it because I have no clue what to do. Should I check and give up if she bets, or should I just close my eyes and go all in? I go with the latter and say screw it and jam all in, hoping she folds a hand like queen 10 or jack 9 that has us beat, but instead of that, she snap calls. Well, that can't be good. Turn comes out the queen of hearts and she rolls over the winner and has me drawing dead with ace king and the ace of hearts. River is irrelevant and we punt off a good chunk of our stack.
Oh my goodness!
After punting off some of our chips, we're seated at the must-move table and we get moved to the main game. First hand at the new table, we see one limp and middle position open to $15. I get a welcoming gift when we get dealt pocket aces. I raised to $40, and when it gets back to middle position, he puts in the call. With $80 in the pot, we get a pretty favorable flop of 10-8-5 rainbow. He checks, and I throw out a half pot bet of $40, to which he calls right away. Can't condense his range too much right now, but he probably has a lot of top pair holdings along with some straight draws. So we doubled the pot to $160, and the turn comes out the Queen of Hearts. Not the best card in the deck because Jack 9 gets there for the straight, and Queen 10 now beats us, plus it'll be hard to get value from all his one pair holdings with the scare card. So I check it back, and we get a nice river in the 4 of diamonds. He checks for a third time, and this is a clear value bet now. I throw out a bet of $75, mainly targeting a 10 and hoping that my check back looks like I have a hand like Ace King trying to steal the pot. But he eventually tosses his hand in the muck, and we're loving the new table. But our stack takes a little hit after losing some small pots, so we're back to around $780 in chips. The $8 straddle is on for this hand, and it folds to the small blind, who opens to $25. I'm next to act in the big blind, and I look down at ace-jack offsuit in position. Could 3-bet a lot in this spot, but the small blind is a solid player who could put me in a lot of tough spots. So I'm trying to keep the pot small with the mediocre hand, so I just call the $25 and the straddler gets out of the way. Going heads up in position to a 6-6-4 2-heart board, giving us 2 overcards. Our opponent c-bets $20, which is a standard bet he'd probably use with all his range on this board, so I put in the call since I could still have the best hand. Turn comes out the king of clubs, and I was expecting him to bomb it and I'd be forced to fold, but he slows down and checks now. I'm happy to get to showdown, and no point in turning this hand into a bluff, so I check it back. River is a good one, and the ace of diamonds giving us top pair with the king kicker. Our opponent now leads out for $60, and there's no thinking here, so I just snap call. He says we're good and mucks his hand, so he probably tried to use the ace as a scare card to bluff. Buckle up, cause this hand is a wild one. Under the gun opens to $20, and he's one of the biggest action players in the entire Sacramento circuit. Cutoff calls the $20, and I'm in the small blind and look down at ace deuce of diamonds. In theory, you should either 3-bet or fold from the small blind, but to be honest, I just wanted to play a pot against this player, so I stick in the call and everyone else gets out of the way. Going 3 ways to a flop of queen 7-3 with 2 diamonds giving us the nut flush draw. I check and flow, and now that action player bombs it for a pot-sized bet of $65. Cutoff folds, and he's known to bluff, so there's even a chance I have the best hands, so I put in the chips. Turn is a juicy one because it comes out the 4 of spades, and now we even picked up more outs with the 5 giving us the straight. I check again, and our opponent continues the aggression for $100 even. He usually shuts down on the turn with his airball bluffs, so at this point I think he has a value hand or a major draw. So given that, there's no point in raising since I'd have 0 fold equity against those holdings, so I just put in the call and the pot has ballooned to $375. We go to a river and it comes out the amazing jack of diamonds giving us the nut flush, and now we have a decision. I'm never checking in this spot because all his bluffs will most likely shut down and most of his value hands will check back on this card. So I throw out a value bet of $150 targeting all his pair of queens, and our opponent goes deep in the tank. He says how he was bluffing on the turn, but he connected with the river. He's looking at me for information, but whenever I'm in this type of spot, I just sit back in my chair and chill. If someone asks me a question, I'll always engage in some chatter because I find it super entertaining. Not really one to stare at the board like I'm playing heads up at the main event final table. He eventually decides to put in the call, and I turn over the nuts, and he shows that he had ace-jack of spades, which had us beat the whole way until the river. Just thankful the 5 of spades didn't come out on the river because we probably would have got stacked. After winning that pretty big pot, we finally got above the even mark, but our good fortune came to an end for a bit because we go card dead for the next hour. We got dealt these beauties nonstop. Queen 7 offsuit, 6-3 offsuit, King 3 offsuit, 10 deuce offsuit, and so on. We also lost about $90 with ace deuce of hearts, so ace deuce suited giveth and ace deuce suited taketh.
English, motherfucker! do you speak it? Yes.
Our stack is sitting just above the even mark, and 2 o'clock is quickly approaching, so we only have about 30 minutes left to play. For this next hand, there is no straddle, and action gets folded to the hijack, who just raises to $7. Cutoff calls, button calls, and I look down at ace-10 offsuit from the small blind. The $7 open is definitely a sizing tell, since I've seen her raise all her good hands to at least $15, so I'm pretty sure I have the best hand. So when that's the case, a raise is definitely in order. I raise it up to $60, and one by one everyone folds, until it gets back to the button, who puts in the call. We're about $700 effective, so this could get interesting. Flop comes out queen 3 deuce with 2 clubs, and this board definitely favors our 3-betting range. So I keep the aggression going and throw out a bluff of $75, but our opponent thinks for a little and puts in the call. Pot is now up to $285, and the turn is an interesting one, and the 4 of diamonds putting 2 flush draws on the board and giving us a little equity, since any 5 will give us the wheel. After flatting the initial open and calling my flop bet, I think our opponent has a ton of big club draws and some hands like queen jack and king queen that didn't 3-bet pre. Unlike last week, I gave up on a spot like this, but I think it's time to pull off an epic bluff in a big pot. So I keep the aggression going and bomb it for $200. If he calls, I'm basically jamming any non-queen or club, but we don't get the chance to do that because our opponent goes all in himself. Well, that plan went to shit, and we punted off a third of our stack. Definitely wasn't my best play of all time, but hopefully it gained us a little street cred in the future. Only played a few more hands after this debacle, so let's get to the outro.
All I gotta say is feel free to call me Pat McAfee after those 2 massive punts. In for 1,000 and out for 585 for a $415 loss.
As for this week, we played a total of 7 hours and 50 minutes of live poker and lost a total of $105. It seemed like day 1 was the start of a promising week, but I might have got a little too greedy and punted off all our profits. Shocker. Never gonna get down on myself for showing aggression, but I definitely need to pick better spots to bluff in the future. As always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my new year-end goal of 10,000 subscribers.